One thing worth noting, my aim, terrible.
All of the footage captured within this review has been taken directly from my live stream of the game. If you want to see more of this live stream, I have live streamed the first hour and a half to 2 hours of the game, so pop on over to our channel and take a look. It's pretty funny. I do tend to cack my pants quite a lot.
Oh, I remember I did this before, where I left him there and he bit me in the face. Ah!
I loved the remake of Resident Evil 2. I was initially quite hesitant of it when it was originally announced, as RE2 is not only my favourite horror games, it's one of my favourite games of all time. How lucky was I then that it delivered on everything in every way, even surpassing the original by leaps and bounds, and thus all my hesitation towards Capcom remaking my favourite titles dissipated, and I found myself incredibly hyped for the remake of Resident Evil 3. Is it as good though? Should I have approached RE3 with the same trepidation as I initially had with the second installment? The short answer to both questions is no. It isn't as good as Resident Evil 2, but I definitely shouldn't have ever worried about it because it is still a fantastic game. I'll start this off by stating that I only think the game isn't as good because the source material simply isn't as good as Resident Evil 2, so the remake could never live up to its predecessor.
I remember this guy that pops out the side here absolutely made me cack myself when he first came at me.
First thing I will outright state in this review is that I will only be reviewing the single player portion of the game at this stage because I haven't had a chance to play much of Resistance as of yet and was waiting for a handful of my friends to come onto the game. I loved the beta with them, playing through as survivors against the Mastermind, so happy to wait and see with this.
Which way do I go? See a big transmission tower? That's the substation. You'll have to circle around through an alley to your right to get there. You mean the alley that's on fire? Maybe. Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames. Fuck you.
What a horrible man.
I think the main issue with Resident Evil 3 when you compare it to Resident Evil 2 is there is just simply not as much of it. The campaign only really warrants the one playthrough, and it doesn't feature the different character selections that Resident Evil 2 boasts from the get-go. This obviously means that there isn't any B scenarios or anything similar, making it seem less tempting to go through the game 2, 3 or even 4 more times.
Eat barrel! If there's one thing I've learned from video games, it's that barrel means explosions.
This is about my only negative thing I have to say about Resident Evil 3's remake. Everything else is about absolutely perfect, and I have adored my time with it. The level of detail and gloss that has been added to the game is astounding. It plays pretty much exactly as you would expect coming from Resident Evil 2. This is in no way a bad thing, as the gameplay sheen that was added to RE2 was perfect, so I'm genuinely thankful that they didn't make too many changes to this formula.
I know that I have to, but I don't want to.
There are of course some additions though, including a quick step dodge roll. Mastering of this becomes essential in some of the chase sequences with the game's ever-looming threat of Nemesis. Nemesis in RE3 takes the place of RE2's Mr. X, and throughout the game's brief 5-hour runtime really gave me a run for my money. Unlike Mr. X, Nemesis is able to use weaponry, so every time he appears barging through a wall, he is equipped with an arsenal designed to make you have a hard time, from rocket launchers to flamethrowers to his tentacle arm.
I should save these really, but
I have no idea why though, but he simply didn't scare me as much as Mr. X did in the previous game. I think maybe it's because I'd gotten so used to Mr. X that I was much more equipped to deal with Nemesis in this installment, that I would just book it away from him at any given opportunity.
I'll never have to go in that horrific crab alleyway ever again.
Those fearless enough to stand and fight, however, will be rewarded with weapon upgrades or ammo for use against him. Usually it only takes a couple of grenades or an execution to make him stop chasing you and drop these upgrades, so it's worth standing your ground 9 times out of 10. Resident Evil 3 has always been a bit of a controversial entry into the franchise. It's arguably the first time the game stepped away from being a horror and focused heavily on the action aspects. Ammo is more plentiful, set pieces often feel like something you would see in an Uncharted game rather than a Resident Evil title, and the boss fights usually provide you with more than enough to get through without too much of a challenge. Despite this, however, I loved the original version of Resident Evil 3 and its action game elements, so a remake of this fits perfectly into my PS4 library of something I have loved playing through.
One thing I feel like I've noticed in this is it doesn't have like the same physics as 2, where you could like cut someone's arm off with like your knife and stuff.
I give Resident Evil 3 Remake a 9 out of 10. It won't please many of the people who didn't like Nemesis' first outing, but for those who wanted more action in their Resident Evil, this 3 Remake will deliver on every account.